Okay, so I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Committee on Ordinance for Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. It is roughly 6 o'clock, 6:03 p.m. The members present are myself, I'm the chair, Rebecca Lisi, City Councilor at Large. Here in the chambers with me, I'm joined by our acting mayor, Terry Murphy. We also have on the Zoom members of our committee, Libby Hernandez from Ward 4, Juan Anderson Burgos, who's the vice chair of this committee from Ward 6, and Linda Vacan from Ward 5. Jimmy Leahy is here as a city councilor at large participating, and I'm not sure if I see anyone else from the council. Thank you.
Councilor Graney's here.
Thank you, Councilor Graney. Councilor Graney at large, city councilor, is joining us as well by phone. I'll entertain a motion to take up the first item off the agenda.
So moved.
Motion to take the first item off the agenda.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. This is a public hearing for a special permit application of Pleasantrees, Inc. for a marijuana growth facility at 111 Mosher Street and to retrofit the building into a cultivation and processing facility. We do have the applicants here in the chambers. Just because I don't know what the Zoom view looks like, would it be easiest for you all on the Zoom to see the applicants and any presentation that they're doing if they are behind us or in front of us?
In front.
In front of us, so like in front of, towards the screen?
Right.
It's such a bizarre
Yeah, it is.
situation. Okay, thank you so much. So you're welcome to come in and give a presentation.
Yeah, probably those three.
If you're presenting something, it may make sense to keep it over there.
The volume, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the volume from the space went down significantly. We cannot hear.
I'm just asking the presenters to come in and telling them where to set up. So
Oh, okay, thank
You
you.
might want to take a seat at the desk. Okay. And you'll be.
Yeah, we'll try to get the cameras nice. Yeah, and then we'll try to get the camera on you. Well, I think Scott can zoom in. I'm pretty sure he can. I mean, if it's just like we were there, they zoom on us, so I'm assuming they can zoom on that.
Green light needs to be.
And if not, we got Jeffrey to.
Okay. He's in the back there, actually.
Trying to get
That-
technology to work for us.
It's just a strange setup because of the way the chamber's oriented and to be able to catch everything on the screen at the same time.
No, completely understood.
Okay, so name and address for the record, and then you could go ahead and onto your presentation.
Sure. Brian Wickersham, 25000 North River Road, Harrison Township, Michigan, 48045. First of all, thank you everybody for having us this evening. The road to get here has been a journey, and we're incredibly excited to be here. I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction of Pleasantrees as a company, so you can understand a little bit who we are and what we're excited to bring to the community. And then I'm going to turn it over to my partner with Stonefield Engineering, Jake Modesto, to run you through some of the specific details of the project. And we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So firstly, Pleasantrees is a vertically integrated and officially as of today, multi-state operator. We actually cut the ribbon today at our first retail store in Massachusetts, just up the road in East Hampton. In Massachusetts, we plan to open up a total of 3 retail stores, currently holding licenses in East Hampton, Amherst, and Greenfield. And then ideally with a cultivation facility with the proposed project here in Holyoke. In Michigan, where we were founded in 2018, we believe and hold ourselves to the motto that we are cannabis people who got into business as opposed to business people who got into cannabis. We are very passionate about the industry, but have assembled a great team that's done fantastic work out in Michigan and are super excited to duplicate those efforts here in Massachusetts. Cultivation is certainly our core competency as it relates to the vertical aspects of the cannabis industry. We are cultivators by core, and over in Michigan currently oversee 70,000 square feet of cultivation space. The project here in Holyoke is one that, as I mentioned, we are most excited for. It'll be our founder and CEO's 11th project that he will have developed, 11th cultivation site, and frankly, the one that, has taken the most love, energy, effort, and design to think through about how we're approaching it. As a company, we've been actively working towards this project for several months. If things continue to run smooth, we will have actually full construction documentation completed within the next few weeks, and ideally begin the building permit process and start swinging hammers in short order. The project itself is estimated to employ somewhere around 150 employees from day one. Typically at Pleasantrees, and our goal for this particular facility is a pretty standard workday, maintaining a 40-hour work-life balance just like any other professional industry. We're very, very committed to being tied in with the communities that we serve, hiring locally, and bringing together not only employees for the buildings, but for the contractors and everybody that's going to help get this thing up and started. I'm going to turn it over to Jake to run through some of the more specific details about the project itself, but any questions that may come up related to Pleasantrees ourselves, our commitment to the community, our commitment to safety, I'm certainly happy to take those. But otherwise, Jake, I will turn it over to you.
Beautiful. Can everyone hear me? Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So Jake Modesto, last name is Modestow. My address is 1 Beacon Street in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm the civil engineer on the project. As Brian said, this project is actually comprised of 3 separate parcels located at 111 Mosher Street. It's nestled between the Connecticut River and the canal. Now, our property is just under 10 acres at 9.7 between the 3 parcels. We have a little unique scenarios. We have 2 private drives that more or less run and tee up, let's say, at our property, which is Mosher and Water Street. Now, what this creates is a situation where we have 2 separate areas, what we're calling our existing parking field, and then our existing building, which is just over 107,000 square feet of industrial building. There is a mezzanine located inside the building. What the applicant is looking to do is to retrofit that existing building. We will be enclosing, I think what we call the sawtooth, would be, as you look at the page, which is just a rendering of this plan submitted, colorized with an aerial to really visualize the property a little better after construction's completed. We'll be filling in, we'll call it the sawtooth, located at the top of your page along the eastern frontage of the building. It'll be filled in along with all the loading docks located around the facility. We are keeping as little as we can when it comes to the exterior loading docks. We are forcing all the entries to our new proposed entrance locations. Within the building, we're going to be proposing a cultivation, an office, and a processing facilities. Totaling, it'll have just over 113,000 square feet of cultivation when fully up and running, just under 9,000 square feet of processing facilities located on the first floor, and then an office facility located, as you look at the plan, to be in the bottom southwest corner, closest to what we're calling out a bike rack and sidewalk. As part of this, the applicant is really modernizing the facility and the property. We're bringing this facility into the 21st century. That includes installing and creating an underground detention system, which will reduce runoff rates to the Connecticut River. We'll be installing security lights, security fixtures, along with a fence, and really designating and creating a striped out area for our about 158 parking spaces located on the north side or plan left for the facility and all our employees. So as part of this, there will be a net decrease in the amount of impervious coverage. We'll be installing roll-off dumpsters for our waste, along with transformers, 5 cooling facilities located where we talked about those previous jogged edges that we'll be filling in, and a CO2 container. We'll also be installing some landscaping, including 8 trees and various shrubs. As part of the project, we will also be cleaning up some of the undergrowth that is occurring to the south of the property or plan right. With all these improvements and, you know, my personal excitement to be part of such a great job generator, I can answer any questions you guys may have.
I'm going to just ask a few questions based on the letter that we got from the planning department. This letter is dated June 25th. There were a couple of questions that the department outlined, and just given that the 25th was about a month ago, I was wondering if you submitted a response that addresses some of these questions.
I believe those comments were regarding the loading.
So it's like, are the plans submitted to the clerk on May 14th considered final? And then there's an outside generator. Could you please indicate where on the plans the generator will be located? Describe the fuel source. Do you have a copy of this letter?
I believe we do, yes, and we have responded. We actually provided additional documentation. These are our final drawings. There will be more formal drawings for the building department when we apply for our building permit. Just for the record, the transformer will be located. As we look at this plan, there is a dark gray located to the middle of the building. There's a bump out. There is it's 3 pads. Those are for the transformers, and 1 will be for the generator.
Okay. I don't want to make you redo the work if you have submitted a response, but I don't have it here. So I appreciate you outlining the answer to that question in particular. So I think you already talked about 150 employees starting on day 1, up to 175 is what is outlined in the report. And can you explain whether all 150 employees will be working at the same time, or they would be in staggered shifts, or what that would look like?
So it would primarily be set up where it's staggered start times, but mostly within that general business hour. It's not necessarily morning shift, evening shift type of situation, at least not in our current model. But we certainly stagger our starts just from a pure logistics standpoint of getting in and out of the building.
Okay. And the number of parking spaces again was 100 and...
It's 171 parking spaces. In that front field, there's 148. So there's a little overflow along Water Street.
Water Street.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the building frontage is along Water Street, and Water Street is a paper street. The fence height regulations in the zoning ordinance don't actually apply to this site location. So do you have a sense of how tall your fence will be?
It would be 6 feet.
It'll be 6 feet.
6 feet chain link.
Mm-hmm.
This is a security fence around the facility as part of our security measures.
And then did you submit the signed and sealed survey plan?
Yes, that was submitted.
Great. The Sally Port, did you outline that? Is that the indent on the left there?
I believe that
Yeah, the Sally Port's just on if you're looking at the plan, the top left of the building, and the way that it's set up is, and the response that was provided is through our security measures, we would stagger delivery times, so nothing's ever too routine. The vehicle will notify and schedule with our security team of specific arrival times, enter through the security gate at the front of the property, be driven through the actual Sally Port into the building, garage door closes behind, product is loaded, and then same process heading back out.
And forgive me, it's Jake and Brian,
Yes.
but in the back here, it's,
Drew,
Drew.
yes.
sorry about that, Drew.
No, that's okay.
Can you move
and
the
Drew's the
mouse-
one driving a little bit here, yeah.
Yeah, can you move the mouse around on the Sally Port just so that it's really clear? Is it, thank you for zooming in, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay. And is it labeled on another version, perhaps?
So there were actual floor plans submitted as well as part of the package. I have them here, but those were labeled within those plans.
Okay,
You can
great.
visually see them. I'd say a little bit better than what we're showing here.
And then there's a question about the types of fluid containers that are going to be stored in the rear.
So those are 5 liquid cooling tanks for the product and the cultivation.
5, I'm sorry,
Yeah, there's 5. 5 liquid cooling tanks.
liquid cooling tanks.
Yeah. So it's just basically running water through those.
Yeah, they're fluid coolers that run the mechanical system. So what has been typical that we've noticed, at least in Massachusetts, is that a lot of folks use gas-powered chillers to essentially control the environment within the building. Combination of things: one, not necessarily having the luxury with the gas moratorium that's in place, but secondly, I don't think it would be our preferred route anyways. We've had just a tremendous amount of success of using water essentially to power our buildings. They seem to be much more efficient from a electricity utilization standpoint on the overall utility rate, but also from a maintenance perspective, there's far less failure points. So it's much more of a capital investment from our perspective on the initial outlay, but we certainly see payback in pretty short order in terms of just maintenance and reduction in operating costs with the utility bills.
Thank you. That's a really exciting alternative that you have found in the use of water here. So thanks for explaining that, especially in light of the gas moratorium. Perhaps other folks that come behind you would be able to use the same sort of technology. Related to signs, it's just noted here that you're going to need to conform to the sign ordinance. Do you have a plan for signage at the moment?
We don't have a committed sign plan. We definitely commit to sticking to the ordinance as it presents. The initial thought is that it would just sit on the, what would be bottom left of plan on that entrance to the building where most of the employee parking is. Just pretty plain Jane sign that would say Pleasantrees on it.
So on Mosher Street,
On Mosher Street, correct.
and then nothing on the
Or I'm sorry, it would be on Water Street, turning into Mosher.
I see. Okay, in that corner on Water Street. Sidewalks and walkways and ramps must comply with all accessibility codes for Massachusetts. And you are aware that if there's any future amendments to your proposal, any changes to your proposal, you need to come back in and have an amendment to this special permit. Other than that, the city engineer just made a note, if I can find my notes. Here it is. That you already have acknowledged that this project in particular is going to require a permit from the Holyoke Stormwater Authority to deal with the stormwater-related concerns. But on the other hand, the stormwater and sanitary sewer piping is already separated. And then the final note is that if we find that operation of the project causes any traffic issues, you're committed to working with the city to create a plan that mitigates those traffic concerns.
Without a doubt.
Yep.
Great. Questions from any of the committee members?
Yeah,
Council Murphy.
okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the mask off for a few minutes, just so you know I'm not a criminal here. A few things. Do you know how many truck delivery or shipments that you expect to have in a day?
In a few a day.
Okay, just
a few. It's not a consistent, ongoing thing, and for the most part, these are not semi trucks. They're typically box trucks.
Okay.
Or like a Sprinter van, larger transport vehicle.
Okay.
In terms of like semi truck traffic, once a month when we do major supply orders. But the vehicular traffic that would utilize kind of the pathway we were talking
Yep.
about, a few a day,
Okay.
tops.
Okay, and I'm very happy to hear 150 jobs, but I'm always asking this question, and so Of those, how many would be more than $20 an hour? Let me start with that.
Out of that 150, how many would be more than $20 an hour? I would say roughly 60%. In Michigan, and I'll be, completely transparent with you, we do need to study it a bit more out here in Holyoke in terms of labor availability, and ultimately that's going to dictate a bit in terms of pay. But in Michigan, our standard, our minimum salary in Michigan is $15 an hour. And it's kind of a fake minimum salary because
Yep.
the job title that has that actually gets incentive pay for some of the work that they do related to efficiency. Typically, most folks there are in the $17 to $18 range as their starting points. So we put together a very strong employee benefit program with a living wage. Everybody gets full health, vision, dental. The company covers 75% of the premium, and that starts from day one. There's no lag period to get going on that. I think we're one of the few, at least in Michigan, that offers, short-term and long-term disability. We really care for the employees that we have, and ultimately, one of the things that I think is unique about us is when the company was set up, our founder set aside 10% of the overall company and equity in the company to be able to allocate to employees for incentive units to actually be able to give employees ownership in the company. So, again, taking that same look at what we're doing right now in Michigan, I'd say roughly 30% of the workforce can call themselves an owner of the company.
Okay. And I know you said is it just Monday through Friday, or is it 7 days a week?
A facility of this size, it won't be full-blown 7 days a week, but there'll certainly be activity on the weekends, just in terms of being able to monitor what's happening there.
And since it's cultivate, is there someone there 24 hours a day as well?
It's monitored 24 hours a day by security,
Okay.
but there's not actual activity taking place or work taking place 24 hours a day. We don't necessarily run an overnight production shift.
Okay. And is the processing facility putting product out, or is that?
Correct. Both. It's so the processing side of the business will extract the flower product to create oils, which can then be turned into a variety of different products. Some of it will move over to a commercial kitchen within the building that can produce edibles. But ultimately, the processing facility is going to focus on just completing the product and allowing us to put out a nice variety of SKUs and products to the state. Fulfillment will also take place completely out of that space. It's directly attached to the processing, because in processing and the way we're set up is it's kind of where packaging takes place too. So bulk flour, for example, comes over and gets put through a line to get placed into a jar or into a bag, or however that final version of that product is being sold to the customer.
Okay. And I'm assuming that once that product is there, you're looking to get it out to your store in East Hampton or other stores like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I do want to note that we're joined in the chambers by Councilor McGivern. I'm going to ask a really quick question, just because we started talking about processing. You have a lot of square footage dedicated to cultivation. Mm-hmm. Are you processing all of your own product, or do you expect to be wholesaling out product?
It's such a roller coaster, and frankly, a project of this size, in all reality, it's going to take 9 to 12 months to develop, and then another 4 to 5 months to actually get product out of harvest. And to be able to predict that far out is challenging. It's our anticipation that, from a flower perspective, it's always our goal to put it into a finished packaged product. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we're not. It's hard to predict what the market will dictate in such a nascent market that's still really forming. It's not mature enough to know where it will go. Mm-hmm. So we like to remain flexible, but the ultimate vision is to try to put everything into a product underneath one of our house of brands.
Mm-hmm. So your desire as a producer is to use all of your own product, or all of your own flour, and turn it into product. Correct. As opposed to selling it off somewhere. Correct.
We really pride ourselves on being a premium cannabis producer, and As it relates to processed goods, it can only be as good as the ingredients that you start with that are going into it. So if, in terms of what's going to take place at the processor, the scale of this project is large enough that we'll certainly be able to self-service.
Okay, great. Are there questions from any other committee members? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, let's entertain a motion to open the public hearing and allow members of the public to speak either in favor or against.
So
Motion was made and seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. Are there members of the public here who wish to speak in favor or against? Is there somebody online?
I will note if somebody is on phone and would like to speak, you will want to hit *9 on your phone to raise your hand.
If I don't see anyone else, I think that we can take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm looking for my cheat sheet here for the conditions. I think I have it somewhere. Thanks. Oh, no. I think I have to look for it this way. So I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll entertain a motion that the special permit be granted with all of the conditions that we have for all, and if there are any other specifics that were recommended and are not addressed by the engineer or planning, that we take care of those.
Second.
That motion to approve the special permit with the conditions was made and seconded. I do just want to be slightly specific about the conditions. Do you have it handy? Because I'm just not getting it with the internet.
Why don't we just have Jeff read the?
Can you read it into the record then?
Yeah, the 6 bit, right?
Yep.
It's 5 now though, right?
Well, you amended that one.
It's 5.
Yeah.
There was a 6 about issues identified by planning and engineering.
Okay, good. So that'll be in there.
Okay. Number 1, that the owner of the building always pay the commercial property tax rate to the extent allowed by federal, state, and local laws for the duration of the special permit. Number 2, that the business retains a minimum 30% Holyoke residents for non-security jobs. Number 3, that the hiring preference be given to security personnel that are retired Holyoke police or are a retired member of another police department that now lives in the city of Holyoke. Number 4, there shall be no marijuana consumption allowed on site. Number 5, that the hours of operation be set according to city ordinances. And number 6, that all outstanding issues identified by the planning department's letter or the engineer's letter be addressed.
Thank you for that. Are you clear about the conditions?
I am.
Okay, great. So the motion was made and seconded to approve the special permit with the conditions that Jeffrey read into the record. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. That's a 5-0 vote in favor of the special permit.
Thank you so much.
you. We meet as a full city council next Tuesday, where we'll make a final determination. This is a recommendation that will go to the full council, and they'll make the final determination then.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Okay, we can proceed in order to item number 2. Is there a motion then to take item number 2 off the table?
Make a motion to take item 2 off the table and open the public hearing.
Second.
That motion was made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. This is a public hearing that the city council raised the sewer fee to a minimum of $8.05 per 1,000 gallons in order to make certain that the enterprise fund no longer operates with deficits, but also to plan for additional needed improvements funded by debt service. This order was filed by our acting mayor, Terry Murphy. I defer to the maker at this moment to see if you want to provide some context, and then we do have our superintendent, Mike McManus, here to walk us through the specifics.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I know this is never an easy thing to do, but I've tried to provide a plan that allows us to get to the point where we have a balanced budget, where we no longer have a deficit within the sewer account, and also that we provide some relief to our taxpayers for this fiscal year so that the impact is not as large as it would be if we did both the sewer fee and the full tax, additional taxes to be paid. I just want to read, I've been in communication with Cinder McNerney from Hilltop Securities, and I just want to read, we've had communications, and I indicated to her that I was looking at doing this, and I wanted to provide tax relief for FY22 to offset at least some of the fee increase. And I asked her, am I correct to assume that getting the sewer account in balance would put us on a more solid financial footing? And she said that is definitely a correct assumption. At this point, most municipalities in the state have enterprise funds for sewer activities, and those funds are fully self-supporting with fees rather than subsidized by the general fund. That would be the goal. I asked then if I were to provide a tax break, it would probably have to come from the stabilization fund, maybe just some of the interest from the past 12 to 15 months. Would taking some of these funds to offset the sewer fee increase have a negative impact on our bond ratings? And her answer was, I do not think so. We're coming out of COVID. Hopefully fiscal 2022 has challenges across the board. What you are proposing makes sense, and hopefully just for 1 year, which would be my goal. Lastly, on that issue, I asked, is it possible to set up a dedicated stabilization account which would be reserved only to provide tax relief? And her answer was, I think you could do that and establish a policy of appropriating some amount of free cash into that fund annually should we desire. So I want to emphasize, it's important that we get the enterprise fund balanced. I think it's important that we recognize that there's going to be additional expense, and if we have a way to offset some of that expense in this potential stabilization account for tax relief would be that way, that we could do this, get our financial accounts in order, be in a situation where we would have a balanced budget both in the general fund but also in the sewer account. I think the rate that was proposed potentially would provide us some stability for the next 3 or 4 years. And I know there are people that are concerned that, we still have a percentage that hasn't been collected, but as those collections are made, that would provide more potential that we aren't going to have to raise the rate in the next 3 or 4 years. If we don't do that, if we don't raise the rate, we're going to potentially look at $1 million or thereabouts deficit within the city budget, which we're going to have to deal with one way or the other. I think this is a way of administering and creating a balance within the sewer fund. It's a way of providing the next mayor with an account that does not start with a deficit and allows them to be able to plan for fiscal 23's budget without starting with that deficit. I think the idea of having money transferred from the stabilization fund for tax relief recognizes that there are, I think the average recommendation on this is about $80 for a homeowner in terms of the additional yearly cost on the sewer fee. My speculation is that we would be able to provide that kind of relief in the tax increase, and therefore, we would be balancing all these things without having that significant additional impact on the taxpayers, and that's my goal. And I'll defer right there.
And just for clarification, that letter that you read was a communication with Cinder McNary, our bond counsel? Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
I appreciate you engaging Cinder in those questions in this process. Are there any questions from committee members or counselors that are joining us at this moment about any of the content that Mayor Murphy read into the record? Seeing none, I'll ask.
Madam Chair?
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Howie Greenie, Councilor Greenie.
Yeah, I just want to ask Acting Mayor, how much are we in arrears? How much outstanding debt do we have that hasn't been paid on this fund?
Within the sewer fund, we were in the vicinity of 1.1 at this point.
So we are still owed $1.1 million from residents who haven't paid their sewer bill.
Not from revenues from people that haven't paid the sewer bill, from the
Well,
the
what I
balance.
want to know is how much is owed the city from people who have not paid their sewer bill.
I will.
I think that Mr. McManus will
I
have
was
a
gonna defer.
presentation of all those numbers in
Yeah,
just
if
a
you
moment.
can hang on that, Councilor Graney.
Did you print
Yeah,
the
sure.
document that Mike sent?
But I will say that, much of the deficit is not from people that have not paid bills. The deficit is that we aren't getting enough money to cover the expenses.
Counselor Bacon?
Thank you. Thank you for your summary, Mayor Murphy. My question is, given that we are getting some of the COVID monies and we can use those for infrastructure, do we have an opportunity to lower our projected long-term expenses within the sewer fund by utilizing some of these funds in that regard?
There would be some deficit, some potential reduction. It would not be the full amount of the deficit. The proposal,
you.
the proposal that we have before us is for, I believe, $1 million, offsetting a bond of about $8.7 million. So, and that's broken out over 20 years. So there would be some savings from that, but it would not cover it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's transition to our superintendent, our DPW superintendent, Mike McManus. Mike, do you have screen sharing capabilities at this point also?
No.
And Jeffrey went to go print some stuff, so I might, he's coming. I was gonna take a stab at it, but he's coming.
You should be able to share your screen, Mike.
There we go. So whenever you're ready, Mike, we're happy to
Okay.
follow along.
Good. So this memo was prepared by the Department of Public Works last month, and it was to show our projections for expenses next year, our projections for revenues coming in, and then work through how we developed what a sewer rate recommendation would be. So our recommendation is to increase the sewer rate to $8.05 per 1,000 gallons with no minimum payment. So it's a $1.40 per 1,000 gallons increase from the current sewer rate. For fiscal year 22, our expenses are identified here. So we have personnel services in DPW of around $140,000. We have the service contract with Suez at $7.1 million. There's other miscellaneous expenses in the sewer fund. These include the sewer shutoff program with the waterworks and other miscellaneous expenses that we have with our wastewater system outside of the Suez contracts that total $305,000. And then the debt service, which is all of our existing debt and the Jackson Street Sewer Separation Project, which we should make our first debt payments in this coming fiscal year. as that project is nearing completion. So we have a total projected expenses of a little over $9 million. We need to offset that with revenues that come in, and we really have two methods of revenue collection. There's industrial billing, which is our sewer bills to Sunoco. So Sunoco is the only large industry left in the city where we have a special billing arrangement with. They are billed on a proportion of their flows and loads, which is the wastewater that they send to the treatment plant, and the strength of that wastewater relative to the wastewater, the flow and strength of wastewater that the treatment plant receives on a monthly basis. So they essentially pay their fair portion of the city's bill for treating the wastewater. We have years of quarterly billing with Sunoco, and I've estimated that this next fiscal year, our industrial billing will be around $1.1 million. That means that the rest of the revenue, which comes from the sewer rate payers, would be around $8 million. We do have some nominal fees, which would be like a sewer connection fee, or when people dump their septage at the wastewater treatment plant, we collect that revenue. But it's really small in the magnitude of tens of thousands of dollars when compared to the overall $8 million bill that we need to make up with the sewer rate. We looked at historical sewer usage, and we have about 1.2 billion gallons of water that are discharged to the sewer system from the ratepayers every year. There's a lot more water that gets into the sewer through infiltration, which is groundwater that leaks in through cracked or broken pipes, and rainwater inflow, the stormwater that gets into the sewer system from the combined catch basins and storm drainage system. But from the water billing, there's about 1.2 billion gallons that come into the collection system. To be conservative, that number has been going down over time. And so to be conservative, I used 1.1 billion gallons of sewer usage that could be billed. So if we take that 1.1 billion gallons and the necessary revenue from the sewer rate of $8 million, the break-even sewer rate at 100% collection would be $7.23 per 1,000 gallons. But we know we don't get 100% collection rate. We get about a 93% collection rate. So using a 93% collection rate, what would be break even would be $7.77 per 1,000 gallons. But that break even rate wouldn't allow us to build up a reserve in case our collections are worse, or if there's a cost that wasn't budgeted for that we needed to expend money on, or even if the sewer usage were to decline further than what we've projected. So to build a little bit more contingency, and we're recommending an $8.05 per 1,000 gallons. And if the rate were set at $8.05 per 1,000 gallons, and we had a 93% collection rate, we're estimating that at the end of fiscal year 22, we would have a balance, a surplus of $285,000 in the sewer enterprise funds. And another thing to consider is so we currently have a debt. The sewer enterprise fund has a debt with the general fund of the city. If that is sanitized, if the city says we're going to pay this debt and wipe it off the sewer enterprise fund's books, then our balance would be zero. But there is a possibility if there is a surplus in the sewer enterprise fund, that surplus could go back to the general fund to pay off the debts that have been incurred from the general fund, because the general fund has been backstopping for enterprise funds. With Mass General Law and enterprise fund laws, you can look back 2 years of debts, as long as those debts haven't been sanitized. So while I'm not recommending that we increase the sewer rate in order to pay back the general fund, there is that possibility with the fund if there is a surplus. The next part of the memo looks at our expenses over the next few fiscal years. And you can see from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23, there will be a large increase in the long-term debt payment, which is our bonding, as the Jackson Street Sewer project gets completely closed out. While we do have a small payment expected for this fiscal year, the next fiscal year, it'll be much larger. And as Linda had alluded to, with the ARPA money, any of those monies that go against these debt payments on the cost of borrowing for the Jackson Street Sewer project, it would reduce our expenses. It would reduce the sewer rate that would be needed, but it's not that much. It's around, I calculated about 7 cents if it were to go forward with the $1 million from ARPA going to the Jackson Street bond. But for the next few fiscal years afterwards, our expenses do tend to level out, and we don't have this large increase from the short-term debt, or from the long-term debt. This is a summary of our historical billings with Sunoco. And you can see we're around $1.2 million with billings with that industrial billing. And this next graph is our historical sewer usage. So what the blue line is a 12-month rolling average. And what I did was I took all of our sewer usage data for every month since 2014 through today, and had a trailing 12-month average. And that would smooth out the curves, because if you look at the monthly data, it tends to fluctuate over time, and this kind of smooths out that curve. And you can see that back in 2015 there was 1.16 billion gallons, and today we're around 1.3 billion gallons. This data was through May. I've updated the data. It's not shown on this spreadsheet, but the flow has continued down a little bit more in the 1.125 range. Mm-hmm. We've also had a very wet summer so far, so that usually means that there will be less water consumption during the summer months. So then, the sewer rate calculation, which we've already gone over, and the ratepayer impact. So with our ratepayers, the median sewer user is at 14,655 gallons per year. That's for the period of May 2020 through April 2021. And we picked the median because that's the, of all the sewer users, they're the ones that's right in the middle. But if we looked at the gallons of sewer usage, there's a real big spike as you get out into the extremes, into the like 85th percentile of sewer users, if you will. It's much higher. They're using hundreds of thousands of gallons per billing cycle. So the average sewer use would be much higher than the median sewer usage, and the median would more represent a household in the city and not a business or industry. So if we look at our current sewer rate of $6.65 per thousand gallons, their current quarterly bill is $97.46. If you were to say it's a monthly bill, it's $32.49 per month. And at the proposed sewer rate of $8.05, their quarterly bill would go up to $117.97. So about a $20 increase, and their proposed monthly bill would go to $39.32. And I know we don't get monthly bills, it's a quarterly bill. This is just kind of a way to look at it on a smaller scale. So that's about a $7 per month increase at this higher sewer rate. So the yearly impact would be an extra $82 per year on this median household. The quarterly impact would be $20.50, and the monthly impact of $6.84. We also looked at other payment schemes that other communities have. So this is based on a straight consumption based. So if you use 1 gallon, you would get charged for 1 gallon. If you used 100,000 gallons, you would get charged for 100,000 gallons. Some municipalities in the waterworks, they have a minimum payment where if you don't consume the minimum, you still get charged a minimum rate. And the DPW, the city, we could look at implementing that kind of a scheme. But what I saw in looking at the numbers, and I don't have them in any format that I could share tonight, was that it would really hurt the low users of water and sewer. It would cause them to have a higher bill than what they would have if they were to get charged for straight consumption. But other people that have a higher bill than what the minimum would be, since the rate would be lower, it would benefit the users of a lot of water. And then other communities have where they would set up a base fee, where everybody pays a certain fee regardless of how much consumption they have, and then an additional consumption-based fee. So those are two other payment models that I don't have to present tonight that we did look at, but it seemed like those other two models would adversely affect people who don't consume a lot of water in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. McManus, for that presentation and overview. I have a really quick question, then I'll open it up to other counselors. But I see that you did apply for $1 million in ARPA funds for the Jackson Street sewer separation project. And in the page 1 figures, we were anticipating an increase in long-term debt payments going up about $300,000 because of the Jackson Street. And so if we fund it with the ARPA funds at $1 million, does that fully fund the project? Is there going to be any debt that has to be carried over, or is this anticipating that at this point?
It's about an $8 million project. So the $1 million would be debt relief, but we would still have a long-term bond associated with the project. The project is funded through the SRF program with the state, the Clean Water Revolving Fund. We have, it's a 2% 20-year bond. It's very favorable rates. So it does, having it funded through SRF, it's a long process to get into, but it's well worth it financially for the city. There's even some debt relief associated with the SRF funds, so that the state funds a whole number of projects all across the Commonwealth. They have I forget if it's $100 or $200 million environmental bond bill that they use to fund these projects every year. And when they go out to bond, they get money back by selling those bonds, and they take that money and distribute it amongst the communities that are involved in the SRF program for that year. So hopefully we'll be getting some debt relief from the sale of the environmental bond.
Great. Okay, so that was my one question at this point. Did you want to say anything else about that project, Councilor Murphy?
About the Jackson Street Parkway?
Yeah.
Not Parkway, but Jackson Street Sewer Parkway. I'm going back to my youth. I recognize that if we did $1 million, there is some savings, but if you look at 20 years of the bond, it's really somewhere in the vicinity of probably $40,000 or $50,000 off of the payments. So we're still ending up with the increase going on over the next 15, 20 years. The other aspect to that is, and who knows what Congress is going to do, but if Congress passes an infrastructure bill, there is a potential that we might be able to have more money for projects such as that. But that's obviously not definite, number one, and we don't know how quickly that would be, number two. So.
Right, thank you. I see Councilor Bacon and then Councilor McIvern.
Thank you.
Please put me in the block too.
Thank you. I'll get to you after Councilor McIvern, Councilor Greenie.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thanks for the overview, Mike. I have 3 questions. I'm wondering if the shut-off program is active at this time?
It is active. We've had 1 round of shutoffs. We're starting the 2nd round right now. So last month, we started with a list of people that owed $140,000 in back sewer payments. We used if you owe $250 or more, that was our threshold for sending the first letter. And after the first letter, if we hadn't received any payments, or if the people hadn't called to set up a payment plan, we would send out another letter that was certified, stating that if you don't pay by the state, you'll be shut off. By the time we got to the end of the program, end of the month, we still have 4 properties that are shut off. And those properties owe a little over $5,000 to the city. So out of that $140,000, we were able to collect about $100,000, and then we had another $40,000 worth of payment plans. With this second round, we had another $140,000 in our first list that went out. And we're working through that. We haven't gotten to the second notice. But usually it'll be around the same capture rate, if you will. And
Okay.
if we get to you know, the way the billing cycles work, since we get a quarterly bill, not everybody in the city gets billed at the same time. It's staggered. That way there's cash flow coming into both the water department and DPW. So there's 3 cycles for the city. We're getting into the second cycle, and we expect in our third cycle, it'll be around the same $140,000 that we're going after. And then when we get back to the first cycle, it'll be much less, because a lot of those severely delinquent accounts will have come current.
So would it be fair to say that now that we have it back up and running, and once we get those initial collections down, that we would be able to anticipate having a higher collection rate, more similar to the water company?
Yes, we would expect that during the months that we can shut off. But we can't shut off constantly through the year. There's the winter moratorium that goes on. So the people that don't pay their bills won't pay it in the winter, and then we'll be back in the spring trying to play catch up.
So I'm just wondering if it would be fair to say that once we're fully back up and operational with this program, which took us many years to implement, that we might be able to anticipate that we would have a collection rate more in the 95, 96, 97% range. I think that's what the water department is.
Yes, if we're allowed to continue shutting off, I would say our collection rate should go up to the 95%.
Yeah, because one of the big objections I'm getting to going to the highest rate that we're discussing tonight is that people feel like they are paying because other people are not paying their fair share. And so they object to that sense of things. So in our consideration of a rate, I hope that we could be more optimistic than the 93%. But I appreciate your feedback on that, and I'm happy that it's going. My other question is, and I know this is a tougher question, and I know you have done some work on it. You know, we have a situation where our sewer volume is decreasing, but we're in this contract where year to year it's increasing substantially. So we have a reverse curve going on. And I'm just wondering if we have any avenues within the contract, within the year to year basis, to bring any cost savings to that. If we have that opportunity each year to maybe try to do that, I'm just wondering.
So the contract, when it was set up 16 years ago, had you know, a base fee for a certain flow and wastewater load coming into the plant, and then that fee gets escalated or de-escalated every year based on CPI and energy cost index. There's a couple of CPI type indexes that go into either escalating or bringing down the cost of the sewer contract, the service fee. And you know, there was one year where CPI was negative and the service fee did decrease year over year because CPI was negative. So it's more an inflationary increase in the service fee. It's not as if they automatically increase the service fee by 2.5% every year, actually. There's a number of factors that go into determining what next fiscal year's service fee would be.
Right, and I do understand that there's multiple variables there, but I'm wondering how much the volume affects the service contract. Is it 25% of the effect, or is it 10%?
Well, so the volume is set, and
Okay,
the city would pay, we would have the service fee for delivering, you know, X pounds of BOD and Y pounds of TSS. So BOD is the biological oxygen demand. It's it's a measurement of how much oxygen all the microorganisms in the wastewater need in order to break down the organics in the wastewater so that we can discharge it to the river. And it's important because the bugs need so much oxygen that we have to pump oxygen into the wastewater so that they have enough oxygen to breathe and reproduce and break down that organic waste. And then TSS is our solids. So we paid for a baseline of the BOD and the TSS. If we exceed that, at the end of the year, there's a true up where we have to pay for the additional BOD or the additional TSS. If we're below that, there's a credit where we don't have to pay as much for the BOD or the TSS.
okay, so I guess what I was looking at was the information that says projecting 1.1 billion gallons, where in the past we were higher than that. So you're saying that that doesn't directly translate into the contractual measures. Is that what I'm hearing?
Gallons do not.
Okay, because I was seeing that and saying, okay, if we're in a downward trend, is there a way to save some expenses there? But thank you for explaining that.
It's the loads that play into our total annual fee, and it comes in that true up. So some years we've had to pay a high true up because we were having high BOD and TSS loads. Those have come down over the last few years, so our true up isn't as high.
Okay.
As it was.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor McGivern and then Counselor Greenie.
Thank you, Chair Lisi, and thank you, Mayor Murphy, for bringing this forward, and which I think is a very important discussion within with the city itself. Michael, your presentation was on top of everything as usual. I want to just begin by commending you on a 93% collection rate. You know, 15, 16 years ago when we were dealing with this head on, I don't think there was anyone in government that thought the department could get to a 93% collection rate. And it sounds like with your efforts and endeavors, as Councilor Bacon pointed out, that's going to improve in the near future. One of the things I'm interested in is you just let us know about the Jackson Street project. The bond's going to be, probably within a year or so implemented or put out. And what percentage or what dollar balance is left of future CSO projects? We know when we did Berkshire Street, it got us to around 50% roughly of the mandate from the federal government to stop dumping raw sewage into the Connecticut River. How far does the Jackson Street project and other similar projects take us into the mandate?
Am I still sharing screen?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
So we have some bonds here that were refunded with Sandy and Bellamy, and those expire in fiscal year 28. Jackson Street, that'll expire outside of where I have. So 38, 39, 42. So fiscal year 42. If we add 20 years to this fiscal year, that's when Jackson Street will expire. And then we have a couple other bonds that will expire in fiscal year 33, 34, and 37.
Mike, on the,
But
not
we
just
also
on,
know that with the long-term control plan, which is in the draft right now, with EPA, with the regulators, we have the Springdale area sewer separation, and we have the Area 21, which is the Bemis, Pleasant Street sewer separation project. We don't have firm dates on when they have to be implemented, when construction has to start, but it was a 20-year draft plan that was submitted to the regulators for coming into compliance with the consent decree. Or actually, it wasn't a consent decree, it was an administrative order. We're trying to stay out of getting into a consent decree, because with a consent decree, then there's stipulated penalties if we don't meet dates, if we have certain overflow events that we're avoiding now by moving projects like Jackson Street ahead of ahead of schedule and outside of a consent decree.
and there are other projects, potential projects, not in the line of fire, so to speak, but down the road, other CSO projects?
Yes.
Hey.
Yes, two other CSO projects.
Rough idea, if we were to implement them all, to begin them all today, what that would cost?
I think the number was around $40 million. I think.
Thank you. The rate fee you proposed, with a good collection rate also, and a similar collection rate, it absolutely would create, it appears, some surplus minus any unforeseen expenses in a given year. What is the cap of a stabilization or a contingency fund the department can keep if there is a surplus at the end of the year?
So there isn't a hard cap or percentage. We wouldn't be able to collect revenue year after year after year in order to fund a Jackson Street type project outright. That's not allowed by the regulators. What they recommend is having a cushion, an operational cushion of 3 to 6 months worth of billing as your your cushion. So for us, our bills would pretty much be the service contract, and it's around $560,000 a month. So if we were to look at, would that be $1.8 million as a cushion? That would be an appropriate amount of money.
And the cushion could be used for unforeseen expenses during the course of the year, which would stop the revenue stream that would be going into the contract and debt service from being used for something unforeseen?
It could. And some enterprise funds use their cushion to offset rate increases. So they know that they have money in the bank. They know they have a project coming up like Jackson Street that's going to require an increase in the rate. And they'll use that money in the bank to either postpone a rate increase or not need as large of a rate increase.
Switching the subject a little bit, how many are homeowners offered the option of a second meter for water that's used in a pool or for landscaping?
I believe it's an irrigation meter, and I don't think there's one for a pool. There could be one for a pool. They have to coordinate with the waterworks to pay a fee and get the meter. And then that water is taken off of their main bill for sewer billing purposes. So it's not a second meter for the house. It's a meter off of their primary meter.
In one last area, Mike, do we know how many parcels are on the sewer connection? How many homeowners?
Yeah, I have that information. Well, not parcels, but we have 7,560 accounts, approximately. That's residential, business, and industrial.
And do you know how many parcels are not in need of sewer services, being that they're on a septic system?
I do not.
It's
But we
safe to
could
say
figure, we
Smiths
could
Ferry,
find that
most
out.
of
I know
Smiths Ferry and,
there's some water bills are a zero sewer bill. So those would be people who get water but don't discharge to the sewer. But then there's also some folks who have a well and a septic system.
most or a good part of Smiths Ferry and West Hoyoke are on the septic system?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Greenie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak. Mr. McMahon, there's just several questions. The question I always get from constituents, obviously, is the uncollected revenue, which is 7%. If you could put that in dollars and cents for me, exact amount of money that much is. And secondly, in perspective, an $80 increase for some people is a pittance, and for others, it's not. For instance, some people who are fully on Social Security, they get a cost of living increase of about $30 a year. That's their generous portion that comes from Social Security. So any cost to these people is significant, especially with inflation rising the way it is, gasoline prices, food prices, and everything else. And there's another possibility that with the increased sewer rate that we would probably have more people or more uncollected revenue that couldn't afford the increased rate. So could you please comment on those items for me so that the public will understand pretty much what this increase will mean in terms of the layman, the senior, the person who is on a fixed income and is struggling from day to day as a homeowner to make ends meet.
With the uncollected revenue, at a 93% collection rate, it would account to about $500,000 in that ballpark. To your second question, I totally understand that people on a fixed income, that this rate increase would have an impact on their budgets. And that's one reason why I think that having a straight sewer rate without a minimum is the most fair to those people. So we wouldn't, it's essentially it's a utility. You have to pay for what you use, and the less you use, the less you pay. The more you use, the more you pay. And there is an impact to people with the sewer rate increase, but our sewer rate is not set at a point now where we would break even. Even if we had 100% collection, we still wouldn't break even at the end of the year. We would still be in a deficit. So just to balance the books, the rate should be increased. To
follow up, what would the rate be to balance the budget? Number two, the possibility that an increased rate might lead to more uncollected revenues. Is that a possibility?
So a perfectly balanced collection rate or sewer rate with 100% collection would be $7.23 per 1,000 gallons. So that it's an increase of what are 60 cents per gallon. So that impact, that $80 annual impact, there would still be an increase, but it would be around the $40 to $50 range. And could increasing the sewer rate lead to more people not paying their bills? Yes, it could. But as long as we have the sewer rate shutoff program, that's our stick to get compliance with payments. So we can shut the sewer off if people don't pay. And then for hardships, there is always the Whiting Street Fund, which if someone is truly in a hardship, they can apply to that. I'm not sure what the balance of the Whiting Street Fund is. When I know there's at least one person that we referred to the Whiting Street Fund who came in with a hardship, because we don't want to shut people off, but we also don't want to run into deficit every single year because our sewer rate is structurally broken.
All right, thank you, Mr. McManus.
I see a hand from Councilor Hernandez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are, I wanted some more information on what Councilor McGivern brought up as to that separate meter or separate, I don't know, account as it relates to irrigation and maybe waters for pools. And how does that offset the cost for residents here? And then the second question is, has there ever been in the city of Holyoke, like any educational components to our residents on the impact of, I mean, first of all, on how to save, how to utilize our resources more efficiently, and then also educational component on the impact that it has financially towards our city as a whole when people are delayed in their payments, and how does that translate, like in a simple way, so our community members can understand?
So
And that's for Mr. McManus.
for the first question with the secondary water meter for irrigation or pools, it's an arrangement that needs to be made with the Holyoke Waterworks. I know a few years back they charged a fee. I believe the fee was $800 to have this meter installed. But what it does is you have your primary house meter, which measures all of the water coming into the house. You have the secondary meter, which measures your irrigation. And the amount of water that people get charged for the sewer is the difference. So you take, this is all the water that comes in. This is the water that was used for irrigation, and you're paying for this amount of water, which was in your showers, dishwashers, sinks and toilets, actual sewage use.
Okay, so then the homeowner or renter, renters usually don't pay for water, but the homeowners, so would they, that's a benefit for them because then the water that's being utilized on that separate meter for pools and irrigation is offset on the sewer bill?
And the sewer bill only. They're still paying the water department for that water on their water bill, but it counts towards their sewer bill.
Oh, okay, I see. And is that information like easily accessible somewhere? I never heard about this. This is the first time that I hear about this option,
Uh,
this service.
since it's with the water department, I would say contact the water department to
Mm-hmm.
start that process.
Okay.
And then as far as educational materials, while I've been here, we haven't sent out any information to the residents, like a bulk mailing about water conservation or the financial impacts of not paying your bills.
And do you think that that would be something beneficial, like to have some sorts of not only educational like material sent out, but also like maybe sometimes some type of community outreach that people can interact, like an interactive forum or something, and we can exchange information there, and that might be beneficial for our city.
Yeah, we should talk about that further. Because water conservation is good. I mean, we're flush with water here, but everything that we save, we can use in the future.
Okay, thank you so much.
Counselor Anderson Burgos, and then I think we should open up to public comment.
All right, thank you, Mr. McManus. So first of all, for the record, I'm not one to want to raise the sewer rate. I'm definitely not one for that. But what I want to know in regards to the deficit, how did we get here? There's going to be several questions. So in regards to the deficit, how did we get here? And what do we need to do to avoid this ever happening again in the future? Secondly, what's the worst case scenario? What if the sewer rate if it's not raised? What's the worst case scenario that will happen to the city of Holyoke? And if the sewer rate is raised, what advice can you give residents to help ease the financial blow that may be possibly coming their way? So that way it's not, it's not a hard financial hit. Because as Councilor Graney pointed out, there are people who are on fixed incomes, and that's my main concern is those people that are on a fixed income. Because if they're on a fixed income, if some are already having issues paying their sewer bill, and if they're on a fixed income, then I'm also assuming that rate is going to go up as well. So those are some of the questions I want to throw at you, and I appreciate any feedback you can give back. Thank you.
Okay. So how did we get here? There was a number of years where the sewer rate wasn't increased, and then it was increased in December of 2018, and it hasn't been increased since then. And with our service fee, the contract, there is a marginal increase in the cost of operating the wastewater treatment plant, which gets reflected in the service fee increases every year. There's an increase in our personnel services. I mean, we have 2 clerks, and then some vacation and other benefits associated with personnel. Those have had a modest increase over the years. And one thing that did help was when Sandy and Bellamy did the refinancing of our existing debt and lowered the amount that we were paying. It would have been worse if they had left it alone. So how we got here was by really not staying on top of an appropriate sewer rate that would balance the books at the end of each year. If we did, we would have modest increases annually, or it wouldn't be these fits and spurts. so that the pain that gets felt by having a large increase in the sewer rates, it wouldn't be there because it would be more of a normal increase in the sewer rate, which is a utility. What happens if this isn't raised? Well, we still have the personnel services for this fiscal year that we have to pay. We have the service contract that we have to pay. And we have our debt service that we have to pay. So if we don't increase it, we're not going to be able to generate enough revenue from our industrial billing and from the ratepayers, and we'll have another deficit at the end of the year, this fiscal year. And with the enterprise fund, there's three models of enterprise funds. Balanced enterprise funds where revenues are expenditures at the end of the year. Enterprise funds in surplus where revenues exceed, and enterprise funds in deficit where revenues, where the expenses exceed the revenues. So if you didn't do anything at all, the sewer enterprise fund would need to be backstopped by the general fund at the end of the fiscal year. And then what can we do for people? I think to Libby's point, education about conservation and other best practices. We could put that out there.
So doing nothing would be like if you got a deep cut on your leg and you ignored it and it got infected, and now you're in bigger boiling water. Am I right? So this is a huge issue. This is just going to get worse. It's not going to get better, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I mean, if we look at, so this fiscal year, total expenses for the sewer rate is $7.958 million. Next fiscal year, $8.5 million. Fiscal year 24, 8.6, then 8.7, then 8.8. Unfortunately, our costs keep increasing, and the sewer rate it's a utility. You pay for what you use, and if it's not set at a break-even rate, then it's going to be on the general fund to pay the balance.
Got it.
All set, Councilor Anderson Burgos?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's been helpful.
Thanks. Mr. McManus, could you just state again for the record when the last time we had the sewer rate increase take place?
It was December 2018.
2018. Okay, thank you. And I think to the point that you just made about, when we don't create a sewer rate that covers the operation costs, we have had a history of going to the general fund, and that becomes really an inequitable way of covering that deficit, because now taxpayers, regardless of how much or whether they used the sewer system, are now tasked with the burden of filling that gap in the enterprise fund, which is supposed to be supported by a user rate. Councilor Hernandez, do you have another question, or should we go to public comment? You're on mute, Councilor Hernandez.
Sorry, I have a really quick question, if I may, Madam Chair. A last question.
Go ahead, yeah.
Is that okay? Oh, okay, thank you. I wanted to ask about the, as it relates to the hardship, I know, Mr. McManus, that you mentioned the Whiting Farm Fund. What is it?
Whiting Street Fund.
Oh, okay. And is that something that's available for all residents of Holyoke, or just for a certain area?
I believe it is for people having an economic hardship, but I'm sure there's city councilors who could answer that question much better than I can.
I'd say
okay.
let's sidebar that question and get to public comment here. So I'd like to entertain a motion that we open the public hearing and allow the public to speak at this point.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's just get the microphone set up over here.
You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hi, good evening, Madam Chair and Councilors. It's Kevin Jourdain, 18 Raymond Avenue, Holyoke. I wanted to go over a number of points regarding the proposal for an increase to 805 and why I feel it's not justified. First thing I'd like to point out is this notion of the 7% that's not collected. 93%, while better than what the rate was probably 10 or 15 years ago when the collection rate was between 85 and 88%. 93 is still very, very low. The Water Department has a collection rate closer to 98%, and that is a lot of money. The question went unanswered, which is what is the total amount of arrears that's owed the department? I think the answer kind of leaked out a little bit, around $1.1 million. That's a lot of money. But to have 7% go uncollected is money that should not be shifted to other people. The other point I wanted to make was that 28 cents is put in here extra into the rate just to have extra surplus in the fund. That also should be removed. The next point I wanted to make is that is an overarching theme. Privatization has been a huge mistake, and its lack of transparency continues to have a ripple effect 15 and 16 years ago. Those of us that led the opposition to privatization of our city sewer system, I think have unequivocally proven correct. 57% of the voters of Holyoke voted not to privatize. And public resources should not be privatized. This was supposed to be a foray of $24 million in capital improvements, and the rate has exceeded far into that. One of the big things that councilors should question is the fact that the $7.1 million service contract has never been independently evaluated. Originally, there was supposed to be $100,000 allocated for a private review, an independent review of the contract to be done at periodic intervals. That has never been done. And as it's interesting to note that we're only about 3 years away from the decision to have to do a renewal, and it's about time we get going to be able to go ahead and do that. The importance of an independent evaluation is essentially the superintendent is basically paying whatever the bill is that he is given. He doesn't have the review of all of the loadings and all of the many components that go into that, and to have that reviewed and question the bill at least every 2 years should be done, and all of the assumptions and factors that go into that. That needs to be done to assure that the $7.1 million amount is accurate. That is like an entire black box. So I don't accept the premise that this amount of money has to be paid every year. That's one of the big objections that those of us that oppose privatization have. When it was city-run, all the line items were very crystal clear. You could question any of these. We could go to the auditors to find out exactly how much is paid. Now we get basically one slip of paper, which is a bill, an invoice for the 7.1, and we pay that. We also are never disclosed how much in profits they make off the $7.1 million. And Holyoke taxpayers and ratepayers have a right to know that amount. So that should be questioned. I would also point out that the DPW formally released its rate schedule going in for the capital improvements. It stated that the rate for fiscal year 21 and 22 would be $6.90. Their past estimates were wrong. Obviously now they're advocating for $8.05. I would be happy to provide this former schedule from the DPW where they said the rate should be $6.90 for the upcoming year. This is in their prior advocacy to the city council for what the rates would be to fund the capital needs of the department. they should stick to the schedule that they previously provided the city leadership. So that's yet another point. The other thing I want to talk about is this notion that they're aggressively going after the people that don't pay. So we talked about the 1.1 million in arrears. We talked about the 7% that everybody has to pay for those that don't pay. But let's take a look at what they've actually done on the shut-off program. In 2018 was the first year that they effectively did the shut-off program, and that came after a lot of push from the city council, myself included, to do that. They only shut off 81 accounts. Now, 7% of their accounts is over 530 accounts. They only shut off 81. They only collected from that $45,000. So is that really very aggressive collections when we have 830 accounts that aren't paid, and yet we're only shutting off 81? In the subsequent year, 2019, they turned off 66 accounts, totaling $41,850. 2020, I'm presuming because of COVID, they didn't do any shut-offs whatsoever. So hopefully they'll get more aggressive, but this notion that, we're really going after the people that don't pay, anything could be further from the truth. The other thing I'd like to point out to the city council as you consider the setting of the rates is this notion that we're allowing them to use the assumption of $1.1 million for the Sunoco bill. In the prior fiscal year, they paid $1.4 million. There's no indication that it would be going down. They should not be allowed to take from the assumptions $300,000 additional off of the assumption just to build up the reserve. This was the other thing that I wanted to point out. Every year we would hear from Mr. Fuqua for greater than a decade, you've got to raise the rates, you've got to raise the rates, we're going to be short. And every year we would run anywhere between $800,000 and $1 million surplus for over a decade. That's why the rates didn't go up until just recently. And of course, the reason they didn't go up is because the department was running a surplus. Now we're in a situation where we're going up at these 25% clips. If we are going to go up on people's rates, it should be a more manageable 2 to 3%. The other thing I'd like to point out is there's been no street sweeping that I'm aware of taking place this year. $120,000 annually is allocated in the overall cost that was built into the Suez contract for the purposes of doing street sweeping. When's that going to take place? Otherwise, we should back out those costs. The other question I would point out is, why is only $1 million being allocated for the Jackson Street project? We have $30 million over the next 2 years in ARPA money. We should do more than that. I mean, clearly the number one priorities, in my opinion, I spoke at the public hearing on ARPA funds, was that of the $30 million, I felt 90% of that should go towards these type of infrastructure payments, whether it's the water department, the sewer department, and otherwise. We should be able to do the whole $8 million Jackson Street project with those funds. I don't see why not. That would give immediate relief to this. As much as I appreciate the acting mayor's gesture to take money out of the stabilization fund, I don't think that's fiscally responsible to be taking money out of our reserve accounts to give a tax decrease. We need those dollars. What we shouldn't be doing is increasing taxes. That's our problem here. We keep jacking up the levy to the max every single year, and we've been doing that for quite a time. I've already illustrated that Holyoke has raised property taxes more in the last 20 years than we did in the first 100 years of the city's history. Matter of fact, the first 150 years of the city's history. So we're jacking up taxes in this town at unbelievable pace. So it isn't just the sewer rate, it's also the amount of money that we're going up on people's taxes. And as we continue to give the mall abatement after abatement, and that's going to keep going down, the shift on residents is now to the point that the city has to go up on people's residential taxes at 5% annual clips. That is not in people's budget, especially the seniors and working families of this community that are operating on a fixed income. We have the highest residential tax burden in the Commonwealth. That is to say, tax bill divided by income. Okay, we have the highest burden. We also now already have the highest sewer rates. Well, now on steroids have the highest sewer rates. So other people are managing these demands on less funds than we are. So we've got to consider all of these things as we look into it. We need to do our due diligence to make sure that cost and collections are where they are. We also have to examine, has there been a rate increase in the industrial rate at all? Are they getting an equal 25% increase? If the residential and commercial have to pay, the industrial rate should also have to be revisited. When was the last time? I notice in the assumptions that's considered flat basically every year in the next 5 years. So the point is, it begins to border on the incredulous when we see past estimates that never play themselves out. Every time this comes up, we say we're going to do it better the next time, and then the next time happens, and here we are for another, massive increase. All these things need to be examined. If there is a need for some increase, it should be in the order of 2 or 3% that people can manage. And oh, by the way, I'd also like to mention these assumptions about the average gallonage are wildly underrepresented. No one in a single family home that I'm aware of in Holyoke has an average annual use of 14,655 gallons. I think you'll find out if you examine that further that the average single family home is tuned more to plus 80,000. So I don't know how you could be off by probably 80%. The average single family gallonage use is in excess of 80,000 gallons a year in Holyoke, not 14,655. That is a skew of a statistic. So the impact that is being discussed here is wildly more than $6 a month. It is more like 85 units of what we're talking about here, a $1.40 increase, 100, probably somewhere in the $125 a year range. For the a person of means, $10 extra a month, no problem, okay? But I care to point out that our job is to also represent those that can't pay this. We have to be sensitive to make sure that we're looking to balance the budget, that we're questioning all these assumptions, that we're using good modeling, and there's a lot of fat being built into this by downplaying the volume, by downplaying the amount of money that industrial users are paying, by overestimating a number of the statistics that I had pointed out here, and I don't want to repeat myself, and we need to take a very aggressive collections approach. So I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak. I think we need to look at all these things and then give a thoughtful discussion about where we should go with a rate increase. But we've got to get to a point where, like the water department, we do a 2-cent increase, a 3-cent increase. We can't be coming in with $1.40 increases. The last increase was a massive 25% increase. That is a whack to people's budgets. So I'll leave you with all those. And I think if we have a big decision to make as a community in the next 3 years, whether or not we're going to continue with Suez, but we have a lot of analysis that would be helpful in this discussion that we need to begin to start having to determine whether or not we should stay with them. Or we should go back to having public operation of the plant. So there's a lot packed into there, but we need to do more homework before we're ready to vote, in my opinion, on just giving this type of an increase. So I would ask counselors, I'm happy to put some of these numbers together. I'll probably shoot them out in an email, but think about that, do the homework, and then let's get to a point where if we do need to do increases, they're small and things that people can manage on their budget. Thank you for your time.
Any other members of the public wish to speak in favor or against? Name and address for the record,
Hi,
please.
good evening. My name is Marie Stargy, and I own property here in the city of Holyoke. I was born and raised and proud member of the Elmwood community. I'm here tonight to basically, very much a novice at coming to the city council. So first, let me thank you all. It was very informative. And now let me speak as one of those taxpayers. I did a little bit of homework in the last couple of days and spoke with town officials in our surrounding communities of South Hadley, Chicopee, Westfield, and Springfield. I was able to speak to folks in their sewer department to kind of gain a sense of what their sewer rates are, what their average billing are, and kind of wrap my head around these fees and where all this was going. What I discovered was that in every single one of the properties that I own here in the city of Holyoke, what I paid in sewer fees in 2020 and what I would have paid in sewer fees if my properties were in any one of those 4 surrounding towns, I would have saved anywhere from $6,000 to $26,000. I was absolutely shocked when I came up with that figure. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a figures person. So I had somebody else take a look at it to make sure that I was actually calculating things correctly. And sure enough, I was. What this will in fact do is it's not just going to increase my bill, it's going to increase the tenants here in the city of Holyoke. We have been very, very fortunate in the city. We are a very proud city. But this is becoming absolutely ridiculous to get these types of increases constantly put on the backs. When I heard Mr. Jourdain's numbers, it kind of just put the icing on the cake for me that there is something amiss going on here. There is something that we're not being told. There are figures that we're not being given. I cannot understand why these surrounding towns and cities can operate their sewer departments at the rates that they are and not have a deficit. We're much higher. When I asked about increases in those towns, obviously increases have to happen everywhere straight across the board. What they're increasing is anywhere from 2 to 3.5%. What the city of Holyoke is asking for is astronomical. I did not know the numbers of the collections, and although, Mr. McManus, I think that going from 85% to 93% in those years, congratulations on getting it up. However, it is not high enough. If you're only doing that piece to it and there's that amount of money that's still out there, there needs to be a more aggressive movement to shutting off those people. If you're going to shut off someone's water, I guarantee you they will be down there to pay their sewer bill. Obviously, there's always going to be some accounts that are not going to be collectible. I have those myself, and I have them in this box, and it reminds me every day to be more and more careful of how I do business. And that's pretty much what I want to leave you here with today, is to look at that box. And let's be a little bit more careful on how we're doing our business. Understand that this increase is going to negatively impact the city of Holyoke. We are just coming out of a pandemic. We are just coming out and beginning to get some kind of normalization into our lives. And you want to hit us with this kind of increase. When I go back to my tenants in 2-3 months from now when these increases all happen, and they say to me, why are we getting this increase? This is what we're going to be able to say. You are here to represent the citizens of the city of Holyoke. I am asking you to do so. If over 50% of the citizens here are saying no to that amount of an increase, then you need to look at a lower one. I'm not saying that an increase does not need to happen. I understand that increases need to happen. But if you increased it that high just 3 years ago, and now you're coming back to us again within 3 years, what are you going to do in the next 2 years if we don't get a handle on this? Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Richard Darrow. I live at 191 Brown Avenue. You know, when they put this charge in for the water, for the sewer rates and everything else, they automatically added in the city's usage. Now, the city is the biggest user of water there is. They use 300 million gallons of water a year. The water coming in is paid for by the taxpayer because we all belong to the system. We pay for our water rates. However, the sewer rate is paid for by only the ratepayers. Now, it's a City of Holyoke's bill, not a ratepayer bill. It's a taxpayer bill. Now, to treat 100 millions of gallons of water a year is $665,000. We use 300 million gallons a year. That's over $2 million a year that the ratepayers picked up. Where is the taxpayers' responsibility here? Why not assign some sort of charge that why should only the ratepayers pick it up? After all, they belong to the city. Every school, municipal building, fire department, water department, I don't care what municipal building there is connected to the sewer system. So if it's connected to the sewer system, aren't they part of the bill? They should be. Doesn't make sense to me. Okay, now, in the last 3 years, if this rate goes up since 2013, you will have almost doubled our rate. The old rate in 2013 was $4.30, and it went up to 2016 to $5.40, and then it went up to $6.65 in 21. It was 2021. Now they want to bring it up to $8.05. That is a 26% increase, a 23% increase, and a 21% increase. Our surcharge is 39% higher than our water rate. There's something wrong. So, why is it that, and then they don't say anything about added revenues coming in here. Well, the added revenues come in here is that we have a lot of construction going on. We have 3 major buildings, which are the Providence Hospital coming online, the geriatric treatment coming online, and all the pot shops, all the marijuana shops that use a lot of water. Don't we get any anticipated revenue coming in? When you buy a house in the city of Holyoke, or a house or a business comes in, they're great to say, oh, this company is going to bring in this amount of money, and this is what their tax rate is going to be, and this is what their water rate. Very close. We don't get that. Why isn't there any kickback on that? I don't know. There has to be money coming in with all our construction going on. Why it's not figured in? I don't know. But it just doesn't seem right. I've been on this for, God, I go back to when it first started, Aquarian. I was with Kevin and Mr. McGivern over here. We go back a long time, 16 years, 15 years. You see, because where I got these figures from is that in 2015-16, the water was drawing down 5 million gallons of water a day. Yet only 4 million were being billed. Now where did the other million go? Very simple. Now these are right, pipe comes into the distribution center, the water goes out. The other 1 million gallons went through all the buildings that there is. You know, like I say, schools, water parks, fire protection hydrants, everything. None of this was taken into consideration. Now, the amount of money that we have to pay Suez every year, that's factored into our rates too. Why? That's a taxpayer bill, since they're part of the system. So if you add those two figures together, you're coming up with a big chunk of money, supported by only the ratepayers. Not right. There has to be some way that everybody pays their fair share. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of smart people in the city. I'm sure you can get some help, and maybe, like Mr. Jourdain says, maybe an audit or something could tell you exactly how much. If you look at the 20% the water the city uses, 300 million gallons, every time I look at my bill, I say, geez, you know, I get a $200 bill. Well, that's $40 went to pay for the buildings and the pay part of Suez. Why isn't it shared equally? Something's wrong. They have got to restructure and go through this billing system over, because it not, and we'll be here every year. This is like kick the can down the street. How many years ago? She remembers. We used to meet same thing every 3 years, like clockwork. Like clockwork. Can't some agency figure this out and get it right the first time and put us on an even basis? No, they also wanted to start some sort of fund to have in case of emergency. We already have the enterprise fund. The trouble with having a fund like that, another fund in here, is that at one of the meetings a couple of years ago, when it went up to 605, the 665, there was a comment made. If we get a lot of extra money in here, which at that time went up so much, everybody says, oh, wow, you know, went up a lot. If there's any extra money, then we can give it to the general fund. Wait a minute. If you're going to have that much money, then lower the rates. Why are we in a money big? Did the sewer department find a cash cow or a well that doesn't run dry? Because it's happening. It's happening, people. Now, this is why I'm against it. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but I got a lot more stuff in here. But most of the points that were covered by this lady here and Mr. Jourdain. So that's it. I thank you very much. I hope I'm not too bitter towards it. But anyway, this is endless. This has been 10, 15 years already. And nothing changed, nothing. You people control the finances. You know what happened. You know, something else is missing in here too, is that when the head of DPW wanted something, that time he had to go to the Department of Public Works commissioners. And from there, they came to the council. And then the council would question them about something else. And after that, they would have a public meeting. But there was sort of a protective layer in here saying, well, I label it the 4 W's. What, why, wow, and when. You know, where, what, why, when, you know. What do you need it for? Why do you need it? Where it's going to happen? You don't get that today. There's no Department of Public Works guy goes to Mike, goes to the mayor. Mayor says, hey, mayor, I need so much money. Mayor gets over, hey, we need to raise our rates. Without even an audit, without even looking at it? Nobody knows what's going on? No. Something wrong. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and that's my feelings, and that's the way I feel.
Thank you so much. Jeffrey, can you let me know if there's anyone that's joining us on the Zoom who wants to speak?
There are no raised hands at the moment. I will remind again that if you're on the phone and want to raise your hand, it would be *9.
Mark has raised his hand. Mark, we are recognizing you, and I think Jeffrey needs to bring you over into the active room for you to speak.
All right, it'll just take a sec for Mark to transfer over. Okay, he should be able to speak.
Mark, you're welcome to speak.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Oh, Mark Lubold.
My name is Mark Lubold, 111 Norwood Terrace in Holyoke here. And I just wanted to make a few comments about the rate increases that some others had touched upon. One, I do think it's important with the contract coming up for negotiations. What is going on the city's end? Are we looking to extend that? Are we looking to renegotiate it? Are we looking to take it over? I don't think that can wait until we're at year 20 for that to take place. I don't know if all the city councilors or the DPW board know what goes into the formula that is used in the contract. It's a very long formula. I believe it's supposed to go up by the consumer price index each year for New England. Has that in fact happened all along the way? How are those numbers justified each year? Who's looking at those to make sure that that is in fact what happens? I just haven't heard that yet from anybody, and I'm curious how that happens and how those numbers are justified. As former Councilor Jourdain stated earlier, the unfortunate part is we are stuck in this contract that we're kind of obligated to have to do certain things, but we also need to make sure that we are monitoring that contract. As far as I know, there was supposed to be somebody monitoring that. It's I forget how many pages long with like 13 appendices to it, so it's rather lengthy. And I think the council should have some of those questions answered for the public also, just to make sure that we're all comfortable with everything as being just managed in the right way. And I think Mr. Tatro had, I think that's what his name was before me, had a great point that me as a homeowner I'm also paying for the fire department, for the schools, for City Hall. So every time you flush your toilet at City Hall, I'm paying for part of that, and that should be paid for through all of the property tax owners in Holyoke through our taxes. So I thought that was an excellent point and something that certainly should be considered. And I do know that other communities have rates for stormwater runoff. So if you have large parking lots that contribute more, that there's a storm runoff fee. And also maintaining our roads is also getting the water off of it. And we're all responsible for that, all homeowners and property taxpayers. So I think that something needs to be looked at to kind of spread that out a little bit more equity. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else online with a hand raised?
There is not. I should mention that Scott from Holyoke Media just mentioned that the broadcast just crashed, but the stream is still going.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else in the chambers wish to speak? Online? I think a motion to close the public hearing is in order then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any, so moved. I'll ask just two more questions, if I may. When Mr. Jordan spoke, this is directed to Mr. McManus. When Mr. Jordan spoke, he spoke about $1.1 million in arrears, and yet when we're talking about uncollected revenues, that is roughly $600,000. So where is the difference? Because I think a number of people had asked that question.
So I believe that that difference, the $1.1 million in arrears, could be from the cost of the sewer enterprise fund versus our revenues that we collect. So that's our fiscal deficit. It's not the amount of uncollected bills. I think our amount of uncollected bills is in that $500,000 range.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going down.
Say that again?
And that has gone down. The
And
500
that,
has
yes.
gone down
Yeah,
approximately
it is
200
going
something.
down.
Right. So
But we're still in deficit.
I pulled up the document that you had presented to us in December of 2018 that demonstrated the projected deficits and surpluses at various rates that were being proposed. And I don't expect you to have this in front of you, Mr. McManus, but I'm looking at this figure. It basically goes from a rate of 540, which is where we were at when we were discussing the 2018 increase, to 665. And then it goes all the way up to about $8 in this chart. And it demonstrates that as early as fiscal year 19, really, we would have deficits at that 665 rate. It would go down in fiscal year 2020, but then jumped right back up in fiscal year 21. So it seems to suggest that even at 665, we were never really setting a rate that covered the costs of the operations.
Right, this is the December 13th memo?
Yes.
Correct. And the projections that were made back then were based on an estimate of where we were going in the future. You know, as Mr. Lubold mentioned, the service fee, it escalates by CPI and other CPI-like factors which come from the federal government. There's an electricity cost increase that comes, the data for that comes from the gas and electric. It could increase, it could also decrease, but typically it increases based on these indices. And there was a guess on where the contract would go in the next few years, okay, as far as what kind of inflation we would be seeing.
Okay, and then I would defer to the maker. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor McIvern wants to speak.
Just a couple quick questions. Mike, there were some great points made this evening by people who testified. I just wanted to follow up and make sure I understand and that we're on the same page. All city property, city hall, departments, school buildings that are on the sewer system are billed accordingly?
Correct. Everybody receives a sewer bill, and even City Hall, the Annex Police Department, fire departments, each fire station, DPW headquarters. We have a sewer bill, we have a water bill, we have a gas bill, and we're responsible for paying those bills.
Electric too, I hope. Especially with all those streetlights. I just want to make sure that's, and the general fund pays for those bills accordingly by building, by property.
That's correct.
The Sunoco contract, when was that last negotiated? If I remember correctly, way back in the beginning, there was a Super 4 that were part of this industrial rate that they were very agreeable to it because of what chemicals and what items were coming out of their respective businesses. Sunoco's contract, when was that last negotiated?
I don't know. I've been following the formula that was given to me from my predecessor, Bill Fuqua. And what Sunoco pays is their proportion of the loading and the flows to the treatment plant. So if we pay $500,000 a month, $1.5 million per quarter to Suez for our service fee, and Sunoco is we'll just use a third for simplicity of math. A third of the loading to the treatment plant comes from Sunoco. Then they pay a third of that $1.5 million.
And my
So
final
they're
question.
not paying per 1,000 gallon rate. They're paying their proportion of the load to the treatment plant in terms of dollars.
And Michael, my final question is, I've seen it in my neighborhood, but can you just update us on street sweeping, what performance has taken place this year and what does throughout the year?
But I talked with Suez on Monday, and they said they were effectively done with street sweeping for this year. That they've been through all of the streets at least once. There's some streets that they do multiple times throughout the year. At some streets, I know they might not have gotten great compliance with people moving their cars. So it might look like they didn't sweep on any given street. But I've been told that they've swept every street. I didn't follow them on every single street. They don't have GPS on their sweeper, so I can't verify that they did sweep every single street. But they told me that they have swept every street at least once.
Any complaints from any neighborhoods in particular?
Yes, Pine Street, and then downtown, there were complaints.
Thank you.
Council Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few points. Let me start with the street sweeping. We are actually, and Councilor Hernandez had requested, and I've set up a meeting with Mr. McManus and Mr. Williams from Suez, as well as the police department, on how we need to do a more effective job. But I've seen a map, and I know on that map, Suez has, on that map, done all the street sweeping. And I've had some people telling me that they were happy, other people tell me throughout the city that they weren't. So obviously, we need to improve the quality of that, and we need to work more cooperatively to do that. A couple other points I want to make, and if we don't raise the rate to try to come out where we do not have a deficit, then the reality is we are going to have to take that out of the general fund, which means more than likely we're going to have to make some additional cuts in the city services. So what I have proposed regarding the stabilization fund, and I want to indicate again, this was from our bond counsel, who's highly respected by all accounts. When I asked, am I correct to assume that the sewer account and balance would put us in a more solid financial footing? That is definitely a correct assumption. And that using that stabilization fund to create a specific tax relief would also be fine, as long as we weren't doing that year in and year out. The goal here was to recognize that this could be a hardship for people, and to be in a position to alleviate that hardship with that stabilization transfer. If we don't do that, if we don't raise the rate, the tax is going to stay the same. And so for this year, they'll be paying at least the same, if not more, because if I could do both and they're gonna get less service. So, what I try to do is balance it, recognizing that there are hardships, recognizing that we don't want to be overwhelming someone in 1 year, and that's why I suggested this potential stabilization transfer. Obviously, if the rate does not go, then we'll do with the property tax rate, and we'll try to figure out some way to cut the budget and balance the budget. But I mean, I appreciate the concerns. I've tried to balance those concerns. I've tried to recognize both. I mean, I know we've cut. When I started the budget process, there was a $1.7+ million negative balance there. By collecting some of those revenues, they got down to 1.3. That's not $1.3 million of people not paying their bills. That's $1.3 million of deficit, of which a small portion of that is in fact uncollected. But we're working to collect those, and that's where I think the rate would, if we raise the rate and we get collections higher, which is the goal, that we would be in a position, looking at where we have additional capital expenditures over the next 4 or 5 years, and over the next 15 or 20 years in reality, that we would be in a position not to have to raise that rate for the next 3 or 4 years, if not beyond. And if we do end up with surplus, that surplus could end up going towards the reducing our bonded indebtedness. So,
Thank you for that. I'd like to follow up. Can you state whether or not you have at this point an amount that you would work to offset the sewer rate with from the stabilization transfer? Is there a fixed amount that you're looking at?
This is the calculation. I haven't got an exact amount, but the calculation would be knowing what, as we go through and we're getting closer to setting a tax rate, knowing what that tax rate increase would be, and knowing what the sewer rate increase would be, taking those two and factoring that against what the tax rate increase potentially would be for next year, I would try to split those so it would be basically, say it was $3 million increase this year and it was $2 million increase next year, I would try to provide $600,000 or $700,000 to reduce that, so it might be $2.2 million each year instead of $3 million this year and $2 million next year. And my goal is just to try to make sure that we're not getting, if it's $80 or if it's $100 on this and it's $200 or $300 on taxes, that's a significant increase. And if I can reduce that by 20-25%, then we're trying to make it. I'm trying to make it so that basically it would be what the tax increase would be, but we're also taking care of the sewer deficit. That's the ultimate goal. The exact number is a moving target. And once this all was decided, if we ended up coming to a rate of 777, we would then figure that in, how much that increase would be, and then try to calculate it. But my goal is to try to make it so that you're not getting the $3 million this year, and which is another $1 million hit.
Right, so then what I hear you saying is that the stabilization transfer to offset the increase in the rate would actually make it have a neutral impact in terms of the rate increase for this year. So we would be raising the rate, transferring the stabilization offset, and effectively ratepayers would not actually feel that rate increase until next year.
That is correct logic. So, I mean, if let's say we collected another $1 million, that would be somewhat along the lines of what I would be looking at. But again, it depends on what we end up with. It depends on the tax. I'm trying to get all that information so that I can make sure that I'm reducing the amount so that it's balanced between this year and then next year. So it's not a significant increase, and then you're going to still pay this. And also improve the service and get to the point so that we don't continually have to do this with a deficit and cut operational budgets from the general fund that provide services in order to balance the sewer fund.
I see. Thank you. I do see a hand from Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Murphy, for the work that you've done on this. And I just want to say that I do appreciate where you're coming from, but the fundamental problem that I have with the situation that we're in is that we are taking taxpayer money from one bucket to soften the effect of a rate increase. But the fundamental problem that we have is that our expenses are exceeding the ability of the ratepayers and the taxpayers. And throughout the city, we're in a situation where fundamentally, given the income of the people within our community, our overall budget, and the enterprise fund is just one example within the budget, is exceeding the ability of the people to continue to shoulder the ongoing year-to-year increases. And just to put it into sort of a symbolic matter, when we are taking money out of the stabilization to fund operations, and whether you call it a utility that's paid for by the ratepayers, because not everyone in the city is able to even have this service, it is not available to everyone in the city, or if you're looking at the budget at whole, we just have a situation where our expenses are going up at a much faster rate than the income of the people we're asking to support them. So the problem that I have with supporting an 805 rate is that I don't see within that rate any incentive for there to be more accountability on the contract, or any incentive to be more aggressive with the collections. And I do commend, I mean, getting from 85 to 93 is not a small feat. And I was part of the group, and it took us 3 years with pushback from the mayor to implement the program that is now allowing us to improve our collection rates. So I am with the ratepayers who want the people who are getting the service to pay their bills. $500,000 is a lot of money. I understand that there is still a deficit within the fund, and I would like to see us come up with the lowest possible rate, looking at some of the variables that people have pushed back on tonight, and in some cases go a little bit more aggressive, and in a couple cases go a little less so, and come up with the rate that would balance the fund, not create excess in the fund at this point, given where we are at in the city. And I hope that we could come back together and take a look with some variables made to some of the assumptions that were made based on some of the feedback that we got tonight. And I'm happy that it was clarified that each city department is paying the utilities and the water and the sewer, and it is paid for by all the taxpayers. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy, did you want to respond?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Councilor Bacon, for your kind words. I'm just trying to do the best I can here.
I know.
I will say, and when I went through this, and my thought process was, I'm going to come out and propose the highest, knowing that if we're going to go somewhere, we potentially could go lower. I anticipated that, and so I'm not disinclined to potentially go somewhat lower. However, I do have concerns that if we go too low, and let's say we get 95%, but we go lower, we're still going to have that next year. We're going to have that $500,000 or $600,000 deficit, not because of uncollected fees totally, but because we didn't quite end up getting enough revenue to meet our expenses. Do I disagree with the idea of being able to monitor that contract better? No, I don't. I came from an industry that has been dominated by getting leased, and I fought that my entire career because I believed in working at Hoya Community College, that the college running an operation made more sense than an independent for-profit entity. I don't have any problem still fighting for that. But right now what we have is that contract. It's got 4 years left. I know there's talk already about whether or not we should renegotiate now, renegotiate later. I know there's an incentive supposedly put out there to negotiate now and renew, but I don't necessarily think that's the right way. If if we can come up with a rate, and I do think we need to make this, the longer we wait before we establish this, the greater the deficit will be one way or the other. Because right now we are operating potentially with a deficit. We've already lost 1 month and potentially a second month before we will get to the quarters where we'll be starting to collect at a new rate. So again, if we went at 93%, that would bring the rate to 777. And that would basically just break even if everything went perfect.
Yeah.
So that's what I tried to do. Believe me, I don't want to pay a whole lot more, but I also want to emphasize, what I tried to do is put it so that, in effect, if we did this in the state, and again, I want to emphasize, I got counsel from our bond counsel verifying right now, because of that deficit, we're looked at more negatively from that, from bonding agencies because of that deficit. By solving that deficit and getting it solved once and for all, the view is that when we do go out and bond, whether it's for this or for city projects, our credit rating would be better. And I wanted to make sure I didn't take anything that was going to create a worse situation. And I think this compromise could do that. But I think we got to start off. We got to send it to the council. The council's got to make a decision, and we got to make a decision relatively soon. Thank you.
Is there a
Madam
motion?
Chair,
Councilor Greenie.
just quickly, just a point of information. On a day-to-day basis, I talk to everybody in this community. Not everybody, but talk to a lot of people in this community. And the hue and cry is very simple. There are a lot of people in this community who have lived here for many, many years. They love this community. They want to stay here. But they tell me that with these increases in taxes now and sewer rates and increases in these expenditures, they're looking to sell their homes and to move. And they love this community. They want to stay here. And I think that we as a council, we as the leaders in this community, have to reach some kind of an accord where we can bite the bullet in our budgets or cut our budgets or do something so that we can take these long-time Holyoke proud people who have lived here for a long time, that want to stay here, that love the community, and keep them here. But if we keep increasing and increasing, it's hurting people, don't want to leave, and they're going to leave this community. And I, for one, cannot support an 805 increase, and I cannot afford any more tax increases because I know the effect that it has on people, and many, many people talk to me that express these concerns. So thank you very much and for listening. And but this is an issue that's throughout the community, and they're very real people, very proud people who have been here all their life, and they want the council to address these issues. Thank you.
Councilor Hernandez has her hand up. You're on mute,
Thank you,
Councilor
Madam
Hernandez.
Chair. You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a friendly amendment to set instead of an 805 increase, 8.00 increase.
Is there a second? I'm going to say the motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion to go to 777, but I do that with concerns again that I think we're going to be closer to balance, but I'm not totally convinced we will be balanced. If we get our collections and continue to improve, and I hope that we will, then potentially that could work. But I don't think we can go any lower and really think that we're coming seriously to solve the deficit.
So under discussion on, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
The motion was made and seconded for a $7.77 rate. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the break-even rate, to be quite honest. It doesn't create any ability to have that buffer for any contingencies that may come up. And additionally, it doesn't really help us resolve the deficit issue. And I think that we are having conversations about changing the responsibility of setting the rate. And so I don't see us doing another rate increase for another year at some smaller incremental amount. So I think, to me, the $8 rate sounds more responsible at the end of the day. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. McManus.
If I recall, back in 2018, the motions for setting a rate were made at the full city council meeting, and proposals for alternative rates were made at that meeting, kind of similar to the way that the tax rate setting is done.
Oh, and there were amendments made on the first rate that gets set. The 8 votes is how we passed that rate.
I believe it was something along those lines.
Sorry,
yes.
we are now 13, not 15. So 7 votes. Sorry about that. Okay, so all we need to do is sort of, I mean, I still think we have the ability to pass out a recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the motion was made and seconded to pass a $7.77 rate. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are you trying to speak, Councilor Bacon? Your hand just went up.
Yes, I didn't realize we were going right to a vote and recommending a rate.
I mean, it's just a recommendation,
But-
and as I mean, that just becomes the starting place, and then the full council would do the proposing rates and then adjusting them based on how many times we need to amend it to get to consensus or a majority vote.
Right. But the point that I wanted to make under discussion and the question that I wanted to ask to our superintendent, and I'm intending no disrespect, but whenever any of us come up with projections for a budget and costs and the things that go into it, we make certain assumptions. And I'm really hoping, I think there were some valid points made relative to the assumptions. And I would just like to see some numbers run with those assumptions modified in light of some of the comments that were made, such as around volume, the potential to discuss a rate with the industrial folks, and some of the other variables. So if those assumptions were changed and the volume was higher, et cetera, it would change the math relative to these projections. I mean, those of us who have run budgets and run organizations understand that. So I'm not saying anything is wrong with these, but I'm just saying it could be brought to bear some different suppositions relative to these calculations. And I just think it would be helpful for that to happen. I mean, it can happen between now and the council meeting from my perspective, but I would like us to set a rate that takes into consideration the limits of our homeowners on fixed rates. I think there is nothing worse than for somebody who have worked their entire life, paid off their house, have a retirement, and be forced out of their house because they can't pay the taxes and fees. That to me just seems fundamentally wrong. And so I want us to come up with the lowest rate that could balance the fund and put the most pressure on us and our department to control the cost. Look at the miscellaneous expenses of $305,000. Look at the collections, look at the industrial, and look at the usage. And I think we could come up with a rate under the 777 if we are aggressively accountable to the taxpayers and within our own budget process. Thank you. So I'm a no on the 777. Thank you.
So you were a no on the 777?
Yes.
I'm going to just ask for that vote again. So all in favor of the $7.77 rate, please say aye.
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 It's a 3, and I'm going to be a no with Counselor Vacan, 3-2 vote. But again, we're just making this recommendation to the full city council for next week. That concludes our agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to
Already
adjourn.
closed the public hearing, right?
We did close the public hearing. Thank you.
Yeah.
All in favor
Thanks,
of adjourning?
Mike.
Aye, so moved.
Aye.
Aye.